Hello, everyone. I'm Dean Kelley with the Georgia Transparency Coalition. We're here today just outside of Atlanta with Garland Favorito and Michael Opitz, who are pretty good experts on voting systems and election integrity and all of that. And we're going to continue that discussion because that's very important in Georgia right now, and try to do our best to try to get some information to you so you'll be informed as far as what is going on in Georgia. On my furthest to the right here is Michael Opitz. And Michael is a founder and president of the Madison Forum, a civic nonpartisan organization. The Madison Forum is a think tank that's focused on good government issues. During the several state elections, Michael was the technical advisor on the DRE voting machines to the state Republican legal task force, monitoring election potential irregularities, and technical advisor for Randy Evans, currently Georgia RNC councilman and former Republican state counsel. Michael continues to serve on the election law team. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to mention Randy Evans.
Yeah.
He's the ambassador to Luxembourg.
Oh, that's
now.
right.
Yeah, and he will be returning back to Cobb County shortly.
Oh, fantastic. And Garland, we're pleased to have you with us today. Garland is the co-founder of Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia, Voter Georgia, or Voter GA. And Voter GA is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, all-volunteer, dues-free organization that has led the election integrity movement in Georgia for the last 16 years. It is dedicated to the restoration of integrity in Georgia elections through verifiable, audible, recount-capable voting. Garland is a career information and technology IT professional with over 40 years of in-depth experience and over 17 years of volunteer research into electronic voting systems. In 2002, Garland became the first technologically professional in America to advocate against statewide implementation of paperless electronic voting on the grounds that it posed a threat to the constitutional right to vote. The Georgia Supreme Court rejected his claim in 2009, but in 2019, the U.S. District Court found the system was unconstitutional and banned them from future use in Georgia. Garland has also authored a book entitled Our Nation Betrayed, and more recently used his extensive IT and voting system experience to author a study entitled Unresolved Security Risk in Ballot Working Devices. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have both of you with us today.
Thank you, Dean.
Looking forward to this discussion, and hopefully you can enlighten us on, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Oh, so much misinformation.
So I'll just start with you guys. Let's just get started point blank and easily. Was our election in Georgia stolen?
Yes.
What makes these systems vulnerable, if y'all want to go in?
Well, if we talk about the electronic voting systems, then we've got other problems on the process side, just with how we as citizens vote and what happens behind the curtain in counting those votes. You know, Stalin said, it doesn't matter who votes, it only matters who counts the votes. And I was a poll watcher. I did 2 6-hour shifts in the runoff elections. And I also did 2 shifts on auditing the votes and looking at what was happening with the voting machines and how that whole process worked. And quite frankly, we can say the voting machines have a big problem, but our processes in Georgia also have a huge, huge problem. The county election offices didn't do their job, and the state election board didn't do their job, and the Secretary of State didn't do his job.
Exactly.
And Dean, so there is a significant amount of evidence that the election may have been stolen. Particularly, we have found we've had 4 sworn affidavits from 20-year poll managers that said that they handled fraudulent ballots in the Fulton County audit. That is could have scaled to tens of thousands, which would have made the difference in the results. The results in the presidential race was less than 12,000. So absolutely, and as Michael said, another vulnerability, which I think is very interesting since you're here, is transparency. And the Georgia Transparency Coalition, I think this is a great opportunity for you guys, because transparency is one of the most fundamental things that are wrong with the elections in Georgia right now. You cannot see these ballots. We have filed a lawsuit to try to see these ballots. We haven't been able to look at them to make sure that they are legitimate, and they may very well be counterfeit. Also, the voting systems themselves, as Michael is saying, they are subject they've actually produced a lot of questionable results. And we have repeatedly called for forensic exams on these machines so that everybody will know if they're counting correctly or not. And we are consistently blocked by the Secretary of State in getting any forensic exams for the machines in any counties.
Of course, the ballot ballots are an issue too, but I want to focus on the voting machines today. Of course, I've learned a little bit, and I'm learning more because I was not as educated on this issue as I'd like to be. The one thing that shocked me is I was under the assumption that the voting system was a closed system. And of course, I've recently discovered that it is not a closed system. It can be accessed basically from anywhere in the world, I guess.
Well, the best example of that, Dean, is in 2017. Georgia has this system that is subject to a single point of attack. If you compromise that single point of attack, then you can control the election results in the counties. And the way that works is it's programmed centrally from the Secretary of State's office. So they then deliver for each election the files down to the counties. The counties then just deliver those files to the voting machines. So all you have to do is compromise the one server in the Secretary of State's office, and you can deliver your malware down and control every election, every county, every voting machine. And that server was in fact found to be exposed to the internet at Kennesaw State in 2017 for anyone in the world to come in and hack. So you're absolutely right, that could actually happen.
Don't we have offshore servers also that are involved in our election process? Is that true?
We have there's an organization, Garland, Seidel, down in Florida, and this was told to us several years ago by the Secretary of State of Georgia, then Brian Kemp, that he had contracted with this third-party organization in Florida to, quote, tabulate our votes. And I said, you mean count our votes? He said, no, tabulate the votes. So there must be a subtle difference in tabulating and counting the votes. So subsequently we found, and I said, why don't we have Georgia Tech write a program? It's a simple spreadsheet program. He said, well, he paid a lot of money, and he named an amount for them to do it. And since they were a professional organization, he felt that they would be able to deliver reliable results. So the results coming in from what I thought was the Secretary of State's office when I looked at my own election, Garland and I were together looking at it on the laptop, thinking it came from the Secretary of State's office, and Garland pointed out, said, no, this information is coming from Florida, from that third-party company down there. They're reporting the election results, but nowhere was it stated on the screen that it was them who was making that report. I thought I was looking at the Secretary of State's office.
And the way that works, Dan, is that there's a company, it's called SOE Software out of Tampa. They are owned by Seidel, Spanish company, and the
privately held.
That's correct, privately held. And the counties produce their results and send them to Seidel. They don't send them to the Secretary of State's office, as Michael is explaining. The URL and the page looks like it's the Secretary of State's page, but it's actually produced by SOE Software, which is owned by Seidel. The election results from the counties go there, not to the Secretary of State's office, as we found out not that long ago, actually. And then they then are routed to the Secretary of State's office, but at the same time, they're out in the cloud. So then you have the risk of them being able to backfill results into the counties and adjust the results. Now, the county.
Excuse me, Garland. You just ran over that awfully fast. If you would slow down, because I just gave an example a few minutes ago of what we saw happening, and by your moving so fast, a lot of people may not understand what you just said. And that's what you said was very important.
Okay, well, thanks, Michael. So the most important thing I think for the folks to know is that the counties do not send their results to the state. They publish their results through this company called Seidel, which is SOE software out of Tampa, Florida, owned by Seidel, a privately held company and Spanish company. That's where their results are published. So they're accumulated at the county, but then they're published out there.
So, see, that's something I didn't know, and I think that's a very big issue. Because I was under the assumption that when all the tapes came back, or the machines, the information came from the machines to your local county, that we tabulated them here, and then we sent the information to the Secretary of State's office. And what you're saying is even in our own counties, we're not counting the votes.
Well, the counties are counting the votes, but they're not publishing them directly to the Secretary of State's office. They're publishing them through the third party that goes out to foreign organizations. So, and then it trickles back into the Secretary of State's office later. A bizarre setup. You would expect it to work the other way, where the counties publish to the state, then the state reports to Seidel or third party, anyone who's interested. But that's not the way that it works. And basically, Seidel has inserted itself, thanks to Governor Kemp's contract, back when he was Secretary of State. They've inserted themselves between the county and the state as the results publishing firm. And then you have various risks because that has introduced the counties to the cloud, even though they do have manual procedures to supposedly to prevent any backload of results. But if those manual procedures are compromised in any way, then the results could be backloaded, as Michael was describing, into the county servers, and of course that could result in changes to the results. So it's exposed unnecessarily. There's an unnecessary risk there of exposing the counties to the internet versus simply using a secure VPN connection from the counties to the state to report the results that way.
Well, it seems like, to me, being the novice I am, but it seems to me like the situation you just described, there are multiple things that could happen to the voter process. I mean, you could eliminate votes, you could have fractional voting. I think is one of the accusations that were done. 75% of the Trump votes could only been counted rather than full 100%, or those type of accusations. So when it's in the cloud, it would be vulnerable to any place from around the world. Any country could potentially hack into the voting system, correct?
It would be very easy to hack into those results in the cloud. The only difficulty is in backloading your changes back into the counties. Mm-hmm. That's the hardest part of the equation. And as we get deeper into this, I thought that there was enough security to prevent that from happening. But more and more, as I'm seeing through our lawsuits and through the work of other people, I'm seeing that our county systems are in fact exposed to and may be exposed to foreign interests in multiple places, multiple counties.
And let me tag on to that. As I mentioned, I served as a volunteer in the adjudication on a couple of different things, and watching the recounts as an observer. But I got to my first assignment. I walked in, and in the first few minutes, I saw a fellow with a handful of thumb drives, black thumb drives, right? And he's putting them into the machines. And what they were doing there was doing a sample recount, a segmented recount to verify anything that the Secretary of State said that he was wanting to verify to confirm an honest election. They were doing sample ballot, or not sample ballots, but not a complete audit, just selected ballots. So anyway, he was walking around with these thumb drives, a handful of thumb drives, putting them into the different counting machines. And I'm going to avoid using the name of the manufacturer here. But it was Diebold, not Diebold, I'm sorry, Dominion. But he's putting them into the machines and working at the keyboard. Now, we were told we couldn't get within 6 feet of this person. And I had just walked in, so I'm still trying to get my bearings. They didn't give us any training on what to look for. but I noticed these things. So after he pulled out his thumb drive, put it in a little black pouch canvas bag, went over to another one, put it in, did some work on the keyboard, and pulled it out, went to another, and I asked someone, I said, what is he doing? He said, well, he's collecting the data off the machines and is going to take it to the county election office where they're going to then upload it. I said, really? I said, did anybody see him take these thumb drives out of a brand new wrapper, that you buy at the store, open it up so that you know it's clean? Could they have other programs on there? And then I watched him put them in this little canvas bag, unsecured, no Republican, no Democrat looking at it, no chain of evidence here, and off he went to the election, supposedly to the election office. Well, who knows what was on those thumb drives and what information, what other programs were there. You just don't know.
Right.
Since there's no chain of custody, no chain of evidence, and you have to treat this as evidence. And once upon a time, I was a special agent with the Air Force, and I understand evidence and making sure that you've got a chain of custody. But here, these thumb drives, we don't know what was on them. They weren't brand new. They weren't taken out of a package. And there wasn't a Democrat and a Republican in close observance of what was going on and what happened to them then once they got back to the county election office. Wow.
So that's a great point, because that's something that nobody ever thinks about is, are these thumb drives fresh? Nobody thinks about that. If they're not, then they could have anything on them. Now, and just to add on to what Michael's saying, the way that this works when they do the publishing to CITL, they will have their election service secure at the county. They will use one of these thumb drives. They'll take it out. They will lock it, put it into their web server, and publish the results up to CITL. Then they will take that same thumb drive back out and use it again and repeat that process multiple times for interim results as they keep pushing results up to election night. Now, that process would be fairly secure, except for the fact that it's completely reliant on a manual event that the election official, whoever's doing this, has to remember to lock that thumb drive when they put it into CITL, or the server that's going to CITL. And should they forget, then that opens the door for anything to come down and be put right back into the county's election system. So it's a pretty scary proposition. Our suggestion was always use new thumb drives, as Michael is saying, throughout the night. So if you have 5 interim results, do what Michael's saying, get a package of 5 and use one and never put that one back into the system. And they don't do that. They put the same one back, and that is an unnecessary increase of risk.
Wow. Now, there was another one, and I did a sworn affidavit on this one, where I was the Republican and the Democrat sitting together across the table. And they had spoiled ballots, stack of spoiled ballots, and then corrected ballots. Okay? And our job, the Republican and the Democrat, was to make sure that we saw the intent of the spoiled ballot and that it was actually accurately translated and put on the new ballot. She and I never had a dispute about the accuracy of that corrected ballot, okay? And so we had stacks of them. And then after we went through the stacks, there were 2 county employees, we handed those to, but not before we had a sheet of paper that indicated the presidential, and this is for the president, votes for Trump, votes for Biden, and votes for the constitutional party candidate. And so we wrote those numbers in. We both verified the accuracy of those numbers. And when we handed the sheets, or as we were about to hand the sheets to the county clerks, I asked, do we need to sign this? And we were told, oh no, don't sign that. Just let us have it. And they put it on the stack of the ballots, and they went into one of these postal trays, with a side about 6 inches high, And we repeated that process until the tray was filled up. And then the tray was moved to another area. I didn't say anything to the folks, but I did call the election attorneys and completed a signed sworn affidavit. And what was wrong with that picture was after we put the numbers in on the sheets, it went to another location out of our site where somebody could easily take the numbers off those sheets and write in new numbers.
Right.
You know, no chain of custody, no chain of evidence. What should have happened is that we signed it, and then there would have been a date stamped, an embossed date stamped, and off it would, and then it would be placed in a secure box with a lock on it, or a couple of locks, tamper-proof, so that when it finally got to wherever it was going, for those final counts from those sheets that we had tabulated, then we would know that nothing could have been tampered with. But there was no security there. There should have been an embossed stamp over our names and a secured box. So we're tabulating these things where the people at the next table over could just tear up the sheets and write up new sheets. That's insanity. But, so whose fault was that? Well, that was the fault of the county election people. Or you could say the state election board, because they hadn't designed the process. I'm big on process engineering. You got to have a process. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a process, then you can't confirm the quality and the accuracy of whatever job you're doing. McDonald's has a process for making hamburgers, so you get the same hamburger,
right, whether
you get it in Atlanta or in Los Angeles. It's the same hamburger because they have a defined process. Same thing, any of the chains. So, but we don't have a process. So what should have happened is that there should have been a documented process, and all the election people, including the ones hired by the county, and I was told these were county employees, where they go through training, and all the election observers go through training, and there's a booklet of the process. Now, so the people watching, and I brought this up, the people watching as poll watchers and also as adjudicators, they don't know what they were looking for.
Right.
They were walking around the floor looking like they knew. Looking, yes, we understand.
But they don't know what the process is.
They didn't know what they were looking for. They wanted to look like they were knowledgeable, but they weren't.
Oops. I meant to cut this off, sorry. Well, obviously, our election system in Georgia is a mess. Which states do it right, or closest to doing it right? And what do they do that we don't do that we need to implement here in Georgia?
Well, probably the closest state maybe would be Colorado. They banned the exact system that we are using here because of the barcode, and the system accumulates votes in barcodes. That's unverifiable to the voter. We explained that to the legislature before they bought this system, and we even explained it, Michael and I both explained it to Secretary Raffensperger before he was ever secretary and before he had even won the Republican primary.
Garland and I had a one-on-one meeting with Brad Raffensperger for at least an hour at a restaurant. And we talked very frankly, helping bring him up to speed on all the issues that we were familiar with. And we had a dialogue. It was not like we were twisting his arm on the issues. It was just a very open, friendly exchange of information. And we thought that he got it and he understood it. And he may very well have gotten it and understood it, okay? Mm-hmm. But that's not what we saw coming out of his office. Garland knows the voting. I keep saying, I have a technical background too. I created the data engineering department at Lucent Technologies, but Garland is what I affectionately call a bit fiddler. You know, he is extraordinarily good at understanding the internal mechanics of the software and the voting machines. And I was appointed by Randy Evans, who's now retiring as ambassador from Luxembourg, and he was a member of the national, he was the state delegate from Georgia to the RNC, a highly qualified person. he appointed me to the election task force and as advisor on the voting machines, and that's when Diebold came in. And I saw right away that there were terrible, terrible flaws with it. And Garland and I just happened to meet up with this, but Garland is the tip of the spear, okay? And I liken myself that I'm the shaft of the spear.
So he gives you the shaft.
Yes. No, but he and I have traveled around the state of Georgia giving presentations on the voting machines. Garland has some outstanding PowerPoint presentations, and we've given these to Republican organizations, nonprofit organizations, Tea Party organizations, and people who have come into these presentations and not understanding the issues with the voting machines. You know, when you talk about it like we're doing here, people absorb a certain percentage of it, but when you can see the information on a PowerPoint, and Garland was just absolutely perfect on that, and then I would add my comments when and where appropriate, so hopefully we were able to communicate accurately the situation with these voting machines, and we gained, there were quite a few people who understood. They said, now that we understand, what do we do about it?
Right.
What do we do about it? Well, talk to your state representatives. Well, if you've ever talked to anybody about a computer process and how the computer works and how even more complicated of what gets into these voting machines, spending tens of millions of dollars on highly sophisticated computers to do one thing, add single-digit numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, what's wrong with this? It's the snake oil salesman who comes through the cowboy town, you know, to tell everybody, drink this and it's good for everything. What else? You don't spend tens of millions of dollars on a network computer system to add single-digit numbers. We used to use the Scantron terminals here in Georgia. And when I taught at Kennesaw State University, we used those to grade papers, ACT, SAT. And we typically had our election results in by 11:30 at night. We knew. Now we've got these sophisticated so-called sophisticated election devices, and we still don't know beyond any closer than the results that we were getting. But now it looks like that people in the Republican Party and people in the state legislature are beginning to take note that that we need to go to hand-marked paper ballots and let the scanners count the ballots. But we still have the hard copy paper ballots, which we didn't have with the Diebold machines. Yeah, the Diebold machines, there was no paper ballot, so therefore you couldn't audit it. And I remember in one election case, Karen Handel was running for governor and Nathan Deal, and I was with Nathan Deal's on election night celebration. You know, you always hope it's a celebration. So Nathan ended up being ahead by some few amount of votes, and he asked me, he knew that I was knowledgeable on the voting machines, and he said, he said, do you think Karen's going to call for a recount? I said, you know, yes, 3 days. She has 3 days to call for a recount.
What's there to recount?
And Karen had been Secretary of State, and Garland helped her write a paper on the Diebold voting machines, at which she was against bringing on the Diebold voting machines because she was convinced at that time they had significant flaws. But then she got into the race and she changed her mind. But anyway, I told Nathan Deal, when he asked, do you think she'll ask for a recount? And I said, no. I said, Karen knows you can't do a recount on these machines. There's no paper ballot, and pressing the total button on the machine is like pressing the total button on any electric calculator. You're going to get the same answer, no matter how many hundreds of times you press the button. So she'll wait for 3 days and then say, I'm not going to ask for a recount. And that's what happened.
It just reprints the previous unverifiable results.
Right. We had something similar in our county, Market County, about 8 years ago, with gentleman Dr. Paul Shaw, who's running for commissioner. And he was ahead and kind of lost it at the last few minutes, and he turns to me and says, well, I want to demand a recount. And I said, there's nothing to recount. I said, other than the absentee votes, you know, those are all things that can be recounted. There's nothing to recount. And like I said, the inability to be able to audit those machines has always been a big deal.
Well, you have to, if you can't audit something, you have to figure that there's fraud going on.
Exactly.
I mean, if somebody's keeping your books for your business and they haven't kept their books, there's no annotation in the document,
Right.
then you have to figure that something's corrupt here.
And Dean, even on the absentee ballots, if you recount those, what they do is they just rescan them
Yeah.
to do the same scanner again. So if there was an algorithm problem with that scanner, it's just going to reprint the previous incorrect results because they don't hand count even the absentee ballots on a recount.
Now,
And
when
they
I,
can be counted more than once too. If you have someone unscrupulous there, they can just run them through again.
now, when I ran for Congress in 2012, I lost by a lot of votes. I figured
Did you demand a recount?
well, I figured I'd get at least 30% of the votes. All right, but I got 10%. And that just didn't make sense at all because even a bad candidate will get 30% or somewhere around there. So I went to the Cobb County Board of Elections, Janine Evler, and my campaign manager and I, Colonel Carl Schwelm, retired Marine Colonel. Great guy, honest as the day is long. And I asked her, I said, I don't want to do a recount. If you would, just slide the absentee ballots in front of me so I can get a sense, so I can find out, what kind of count. I don't want to take them out of the building, don't want to touch them. Just slide them right in front of me for Cobb County. Not even the 6th district, just Cobb County. And she said, no. And I said, why? She said, you don't need to see it. And I said, but I would like to see it, like to do a comparison of the voting machine results and to see how it compares to the absentee ballots. She said, no. If you want to see them, you're going to have to go to court. Well, we went to court, had a great Atlanta attorney, who is my campaign attorney, really good guy, and we went to Cobb County Superior Court. And Cobb County had 3 of their attorneys there in opposition. So Judge Adele Grubbs presided. And we made our argument. Cobb County made their argument that we should not be allowed to see them. And Judge Adele Grubbs said to my attorney and myself, said, you have no compelling reason to see these ballots, and there's nothing in state law that allows you to see it, so motion denied. Said, if you want to see it, go get a state law passed. So I went down and a few legislators, and I told them, I said, did you know that you as an elected official cannot see your absentee ballots? And they were astounded. I said, Senator Johnny Isakson has no right to see his. The governor can't see the absentee ballots that cast for him. And the only way, and you can't, the only way to do that is that we have to pass a state law that allows any legitimate candidate to view, doesn't have to be to take them out, do a recount, to view the absentee ballots. And all the legislators I talked with were just astounded. You mean I can't see my own absentee ballot or the votes cast? No, you can. So anyway, we went to see the election or the legislative council who drafts the plain language into the legalese for the legislature, and that was done. And the legislator who sponsored this, as I understand, it could not even get to committee because the Speaker of the House would not even let it go before the committee. So it was never voted on, and to this day,
DOA, huh?
To this day, any candidate running for election, whether they're successful or unsuccessful, at the governor or the senator or congressional level, cannot see the absentee ballots. Now, talk about a lack of transparency. Transparency is what keeps elections honest. So going back,
any candidate ought to be able to go and observe those ballots.
That's right. So even going back to the 2012, and it was 2013, I think, when we actually brought the case after the election was over.
And Dean, to carry on with the story, it's still going on because we now have lawsuits in 2 different counties right now to do what Michael tried to do 7 years ago or 8 years ago.
So they're reserved.
So yeah, we want to be able to see the ballots. That should be common sense. There's nothing secret, no voter information on the ballots. It doesn't interfere with any other election, and there's nothing transparent, nothing proprietary about that. So there's no reason why voters or candidates cannot look at these ballots to make sure they're counted correctly. Even in the case of 4 sworn affidavits from 20-year poll managers saying that they handled counterfeit ballots during the Amgown audit, we have still yet to get the court order necessary to get to inspect these ballots visually and forensically. So transparency is at the heart of everything that's wrong in Georgia, both for the ballots and also for the voting systems. We have yet to get forensic exams on those systems, and we are being blocked consistently, in this case by the Secretary of State. So it's just unbelievable that you, as a citizen in the state of Georgia, cannot see what should be your public right to see. And what we have here is the man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz type voting. Just trust us. I'm sorry.
I like that analogy.
I was just thinking of that. Also thinking, yeah, you're playing roulette, but you can't look underneath the table.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
That's right. So anytime anybody tells you, you can't, we don't want you verifying this, you can't see that. What amazes me is that it has taken us, and it's still taking us. We're not quite there yet. You know, I explained earlier before we went on camera that I'm a member I'm on the Republican State Committee, 6th District Committee, Cobb County Committee, and I'm precinct chair. And we just finished an election, recommendations on election reform, and it's a very good reform package. I have to say it. I was impressed with the other 19 members that came up with the recommendations over a 2-week period. Just incredible work, and you typically don't expect this kind of work to come out of a committee, but it was just stellar. So I have to give credit to the way the meeting was run and conducted. Brad Raffensperger did a great job on it, and great members of the committee. But we hope that these election reforms will go into place. They're being submitted as a package to the state legislature, and it's important that everybody hearing this, and they'll see this, it'll be out in the news very, very soon, almost immediately. I'm expecting my copy to be released today that I can then release to Madison Forum members. But you have to call the state legislators and twist their arm. And that's another one of the problems. We shouldn't elect people whose arms we have to twist to do the right thing. They should be the leaders in leading us to do the right thing. We haven't had a good legislative leader since Bobby Franklin. He was all about ethics. He died in office, but you didn't have to twist Bobby Franklin's arm to do what was right. He knew what was right.
True. Sometimes he would twist my arm to do what's right.
That's right. And those are the kind of people we need to elect. But you can't elect anybody. You can't elect anybody. I'll say it again for the 3rd time. You can't elect anybody until you know that we have honest voting machines reflecting the will of the people. If I ran for dog catcher today, I really don't think I'd get elected. You know, if you look at Mike Lindell's expose on the voting machines, and you have to watch it all the way to the end, and show how these votes are manipulated. At one point, he shows them all coming into Georgia from China, and then data going back, and it's coming in from Iran. So they can get down to the county level, they can get down to the precinct level, and manipulate the votes of any election they want to turn. So I'm not going to get into all the elections that had anomalies and who should have won, who should have lost. Just say, we don't have a voting system that I have faith and confidence in to reflect the will of the people. As long as we have a voting system that reflects the will of the people, although I might not agree with the outcome, I will defend that system.
Right. So what kind of, well, first of all, you know, our voting integrity and transparency is the very foundation of our republic and our democratic process. And my biggest fear, and I've expressed this to others, is that if people do not have confidence in that system, they'll stay home and not vote.
And the other side will manipulate the election,
Yes.
and then we go down a deep, dark rabbit hole.
Right.
And we've seen that happen in the world from Nazi Germany,
Venezuela.
to Venezuela, and the Soviet Union. And again, as you know, they killed 20, 30 million people in the Soviet Union. As Stalin said, the death of one person is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. Okay, and so elections mean everything. That's how the laws are passed. That's how people are sent to jail. That's how people are punished. And we're seeing that play out right before us. So when Garland and I talked about this 10 or 15 years, people said, oh, come on.
I remember.
Come on, that can't happen.
Nobody took it seriously.
Come on, man.
Now, on these reforms that you're talking about, and I've talked to others about it, the feeling seems to be that they expect, of course, I don't know what the final outcome will be, but they expect that there will be a election bill that will come out of a legislature session this time.
I think so. I think that'll happen. I think people are waking up. I mean, the kraken, the thunderclap has been heard. And people are awake now. I've got people calling me, my relatives from Alabama, my wife's relatives from Alabama, calling me really, upset. These people don't even know who their representatives are in Montgomery. But they're calling me and saying very plainly, what are y'all doing over there? You know, you got to get a handle on this. Carmen, do you know who your state representative is? No, but you better find out who yours is and fix this problem. Honest to God, this is a conversation I've had 2 times in the last 3 days.
The irony of the situation that we're in now is that we are told that we're going to have to rely on the same people to fix this problem who created the problem in the first place. And not just that they created the problem, they literally ignored people like Michael and me, hundreds of people like Michael and me, for multiple years. We had recommendations published on the voterj.org website, Safe Commission, hundreds of people testifying. They've all said what Michael is already saying again. And now somehow we are going to trust them to fix this problem this go around. Here's the way, if I'm going to trust them, the first thing I would like to see the legislature do is subpoena the ballots in Fulton County and some of these other counties, and subpoena the machines and do forensic exams on the questionable counties at least. If that's what they want to do to fix it, that's where they need to start. Don't tell me you're going to give me some election bill when you created this problem. If you're really serious about it, and this is a call for the Georgia legislature, you're serious about it, go out tomorrow and subpoena these ballots that we're trying to get through the court, and subpoena those voting machines. You know the counties, I'll give them to you for forensic exam. That's what we want you folks to do right now, today, tomorrow. Do that, and then maybe we can trust you to fix the problem.
See, the other part of that is that I'm adamant that because we're starting to see it already, these representatives and senators saying, oh, yeah, it's that old metaphor, there they go and I must hasten after them for I am their leader. So that they're saying, oh, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And the question I have for them said, where have you been? What have you done in the past? Tell me where you've held studies on the voting machine. David Schaefer was spectacular in creating this commission that he created, and in 3 weeks we have all of these wonderful proposals. I mean, really good stuff. Where are the state legislators who have been around the states for years coming up with these ideas to aggressively, proactively, not react? They're all reactive, they're not proactive. So we when you ask them, make sure you got 5 of your friends there and really pin them to the wall. If they don't have good answers, it's time to primary them.
The Army is moving, so I just must run out in front so I can lead it.
That's right. That's it.
And of course, the legislation changes definitely need to be made, but in addition to that, I would like to see a very thorough, public, transparent investigation into what's happened in Georgia. Because unless we do an investigation, I'm not convinced that we can fix all of the issues. I'm worried about maybe a Band-Aid might be put here, a Band-Aid might be put there, but the underlying issues and problems may not be resolved.
So that's a great point, Dean, and an example of that would be we're proposing this legislation, but we haven't found out what the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know, did we have 20,000 or 30,000 counterfeit ballots in Fulton County or not? If we did, that's going to require different legislation. How did we get there than what we did? Same with the machines. Did these machines in all these counties, Coffee County, Fulton, Ware, all these other counties, did they actually count correctly or not? We need to know that before we can draft legislation. Mm-hmm. So we have these legislators that are telling us they're going to fix this problem, but they're not willing to investigate the problem to find out what it is. And here, the reason is that the elections investigations are done by the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is blocking these. The Attorney General does not want to get involved because they're an election investigation. Likewise, GBI or anybody else, which you probably couldn't trust them anyway. So here, the problem is that the Secretary of State is blocking these investigations over the things in which he is in control of, and that is unconscionable.
Absolutely.
Now, so then you have to ask, why would he be blocking investigations? Let's get down below the surface. What is it to his advantage to block the investigations? We've heard that his brother is chief financial officer for what company? Is it Huawei?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I've heard that but I don't have an answer. But, we have to look below the surface. We can't look above the surface to get the answers we want, or else there would be no need to have detectives or investigators.